Thank you very much. Thank you all for sticking with us at 4:30 in the afternoon. We're very grateful to RISM for having this wonderful idea of a work level. And I want to point to the word perspectives in the subtitle of the conference because that's where I'm going with our remarks. So I represent a consortium. We have a grant called Digging into the Knowledge Graph. We have, it's part of the 4th International Digging into Data Challenge. It is international and interdisciplinary, so we have teams as were required by the funding, teams from Brazil, Canada, the United States, and the Netherlands. And we also have an interdisciplinary team. We have data scientists, musicologists, economists, information scientists, and at least one physicist. And so my job as principal investigator is to keep that group of people from exploding when we meet together. But so far we are having a wonderful time and we are learning quite a lot about trying to apply linked open data principles to source material in the humanities and the social sciences. We have 2 cases for our 3-year project. One is in Renaissance polyphony, and that's the one we'll talk about today. The other is in economics. You can come in 2 years to hear about that at another conference. So our job is to basically to teach the cloud to use knowledge organization systems in an efficient and recurring way so as to make scholarship self-indexing in the linked open data cloud. It's a challenge, as you can imagine, but we're really enjoying that challenge. So our first use case is based on the computerized mensural music editing project. I call it CMME all the time, so I forget how to say all that. Marnix is one of the editors, originators, one of the scholars involved in that project. And as soon as I stop with the slides, he can tell you all about it. So you might ask why we chose that project, and I like to say there are 2 really good reasons. One is that it was available to us because Marnix is associated with the Data Archiving and Network Services Institute in the Netherlands. And another is that we had a copy, a dump of the database. So it was available and we have expertise available. And it also is stable. It doesn't change by the minute. If it changes a little bit now and again, it's all right. We were having a meeting about that this morning. Sometimes there's some discrepancy between what we have in our data dump and what we see online. But in general, we're working with, not working with a moving target, which makes our job much easier. The CMME is a very rich project in terms of entities and yet also very elegant. Its structure is simple. There are composers, works, sources, and editorial projects. The music we are working with has this simple metadata structure: form of work, medium of work, notation, text, liturgical function. So for us, those are the categories that we need to consider to link to when we're linking into the cloud. Now, the other thing that's very important for us is that we bear in mind always that we are working from highly curated musicological data, and therefore we want to link to highly curated musicological data. So we want to make sure that we link the CMME project to sources that will be useful in musicological scholarship, but that also are carefully constructed. We have 221 composers, 3,671 musical works, and 75% of the composers were already in VIAF in one form or another. About the opposite number, about 3/4 of the works are not, or were not, I should say, in VIAF. and none of the manuscripts or manuscript sources have been established there. Our job, therefore, is to begin by linking the musical works directly to Vrije, because this provides us a link to curated work data, but also through that link onto heritage institutions, library, archives, museums, and so forth, and as we discovered yesterday, on through to RISM. We also have tasks that I won't describe any further, and those are to link to Library of Congress genre and form terms, to the universal decimal classification, which we have turned into linked open data, and to a new classification called the Basic Concepts Classification. The BCC is not hierarchical and not disciplinary, it is phenomenon-based. So instead of getting, for instance, to our favorite example is Atlantic Convoy. In the UDC, you can just go to defense warship, but in the basic concepts classification, we can say convoy of ships in the Atlantic in a given year, in a given place. All right, we also are mapping all of our work through the Seadog CRM. I've worked with the CRM for 2 decades now, and I find it to be an essential meta-level ontology for cultural heritage. Our consortium has grown from the 4 initial partners to now include the Linked Open Data Laundromat, which is a project from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and the Library of Congress NACO project, in which we now participate through the Music Library Association NACO Music Funnel. And we also have partnered with Concordia University in Montreal, who provides us a funnel into NACO through OCLC. So this is a picture of me in 1983. As you heard, if you listened carefully, my first job in real life was as a music cataloger. In 1974, I was hired as cataloger of printed music at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I guess I can, fortunately I have no pictures from 1974. And that's Judy Coffman, who, if you're a music librarian, you may have heard of her. We owe it to her the entire process of thinking about music other than Western art in subject and classificatory access, at least in the US. So the first day on my job, I was one of 3 catalogers. There was one for sound recordings and one for microfilms. And the person with the microfilms had about 2,000 white boxes at her desk. And those 2,000 boxes in 1974 are what Marnix was calling this morning the census catalog at the University of Illinois. I don't know what the record person did. About an hour after I arrived, they brought me a box card file, 4 little drawers, and they said, "This is the RISM file, you're in charge of it." I said, "What's RISM?" So it was, I actually knew what RISM was, but this was a file of everything that was in RISM that was theoretically in the library at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And my job was to be in charge of that, help it grow, help communicate with the RISM project. Right away, I discovered that most of the things that were in the card file did not match the things that they were supposed to be in RISM. And the main reason this happened was that whoever had done the inventory had seen a title and a composer and said, "Oh, that must be this, check." But in fact, if I set the 3 descriptions from the catalog, the RISM, and the item itself together, they did not match. And this is, of course, the work problem that I later described as the problem of instantiation. Just because it says composer work title doesn't mean it is the same as all the 460 other editions of the same musical work. So I began my career as a music cataloger with that problem, the first day, the first hour. Later that week, they told me that they were in the process of reclassifying what was then the 5th largest music collection in the world, from the Dewey Decimal classification to the Library of Congress classification. Therefore, whenever a new edition of anything arrived, I was to pull the old ones and reclassify them. So you can imagine if you're working in a general library with books, a new edition is going to arrive every few weeks, and you find the old edition. But in our case, we would get a score of a Beethoven symphony, and I had 1,500 to pull from the stacks and pull all the cataloging and somehow coordinate all of it. So that was my double whammy, that the works problem was a problem that really, really needed attention. And that's where I'm going to take you in our story today. What I discovered were three things: that there is a theory of instantiation by which we can predict when a work will exist in more than one iteration. Instantiation is what we call it to give it the meaning of realization at a moment in time. Works themselves are mente facts, and the work identifiers, such as those we find in catalogs, are historical anchors. So let's just repeat that. Works are mente facts. That means they are intellectual or mental constructs. They are artifacts of their culture. Their meaning is abstract at every level, from conception to reception to inherence. And that cultural meaning, both collectively and individual, is both mutable and constantly mutating. So if you were looking closely, you just saw three images of Saint Cecilia, who in every case is the patron saint of music. But as you saw, the image shifted. Mente facts are iconic, but that doesn't mean they're fixed. They're always mutating. And this is, in fact, the case with musical works. And so where could I go but to Beethoven for my example? Work identifiers are historical anchors in knowledge organization systems. So there are cultural memory triggers, and this little pattern from Beethoven is so well known that even people who know it only from sleeping pill commercials or movies, who've never been to an orchestra concert, they still know that pattern. They can sing it. I'm not going to try to sing it for you. But they know what it is. That makes it iconic, but it also shifts around in cultural as it gets used in places other than the symphony hall all the time. And so that means it has meaning beyond the original intention, although we don't know, I suppose, what Beethoven's intention was. Here is a library. In our catalog record, I don't take responsibility for it. I grabbed it from OCLC. So if there's an error, it's not my fault. But as you see, we have the character string that gives us the composer dates and what is now called the preferred title, which is, as we heard yesterday, an artificial but very carefully constructed string. In the field of knowledge organization, we call this a form of alpha symbolic classification. We have a class of works. We name that class Beethoven, and within that class are divisions, and the divisions are works by Beethoven, and within those work classes are subdivisions, and those are the manifestations of the work, and there's a reason I skipped a level. All right, so this is the data model of our project. This is what is more relevant to what we're doing today. So we have editorial projects, we have the manuscript sources, and from them we have in the CMME project individual composers, and those composers are, the CRM is animated. Okay, so the composers are essentially part of they're the actors who are responsible for the composition, the expression, creation. And then we have the works, and the works exist both as appellations for the composition itself and for the forms and genres. So what we want to do in our project is take that data model and link it through existing linked open data cultural heritage models And here's the list. I told you about all that a few minutes ago. Because by doing that, we link onward to libraries, archives, museums, their holdings, other data sources to which they are linked, and so forth. So our music cataloger who works on this project, he's one of our co-authors, Brad Young, and Brad says, I can read it, but it's not on the slide, that this is like cataloging a list of works. So what he means is we have no scores, we have no recordings, we don't have anything on our desk to stare at and sing in our head. We are working entirely with the curated data in the CMME project. So we are working exclusively with Mente facts and their historical anchors. So I have three simple examples just to show you what we're doing. This is simple because it works simply. Arca Delt is represented in VIAF already when we got there, and we created a record for the work Corona Aurea. I guess I forgot to tell you that when we discovered 3/4 of the works in CMME were not in VIAF, we asked the Library of Congress if they would allow us to enter works as we needed to link to them. And that prospect took 1.5 years to arrange, but yet we are now contributing to VIAF from our project through the Library of Congress name authority file. I don't know whether you understand that that is a historic step. We are the first project ever to create library data that is, we are not a library. But we are able to create these records according to Library of Congress standards. All right, so we have composer to work relationships, and then we link through to VIAF and out to the rest of the world through the cloud. Okay, so this is a more interesting example, and Marnix will laugh maybe. What you have here is, we have a name, is it Bougel? And this person is sometimes also known by all those other names. And we have a work, the second line, Misa Bruxelles, and you see that question mark, which means the attribution is uncertain in the CMME database. It's also tricky because, from what I'm told, Bruxelles there may be a title rather than an attribution. And so, or it could be the other way around. It could be an attribution and maybe a title. It's not clear. So in fact, this work has at various times been associated with Philippe de Bruce, Geraldine Boucher, Diego Bruegel, and Pedro Bruegel. How will this work in our context? Well, we create a work record without a composer in it for the work by title. And then we link to all of the potential attributions through the brilliant complexity of the mark structure. So we're able to link what we have to what the sources say might be relevant, and from there on into VIAF. I'm stuck. Oh, CRM again. All right. A third example is by Brumel. And here's a case where, as you see, we have three things that say Misa, and they're really not distinguished, except that we see one has questionable attribution. And then if you were to link on the source links to the right, you would see that there is actually more information. And as Marnix sorted out this morning, we were discussing this, these are in fact distinct works. But it's not clear that they're distinct works initially. But the first one is actually a work known as Misa Sine Nomine, and we have only the Benedictus from it. And this is our first work in the year of research that we've discovered in RISM. So we're really excited. So what we have is RISM There's the work for the collection, the source collection. Here's the future VIAF record that's in draft mode. It hasn't been uploaded yet, and that's where we are citing Grove Music and so forth, and linking on through. So that's about it. Our perception is that musical works are mente facts, and that we have to keep that first and foremost in mind in this work. Those nominal identifiers are historical anchors, and here's where I believe the RISM work level is really, really critical in helping anchor those anchors. The linked open data value-added principle requires us to link curated resources to curated resources. VIAF has been for us the best gateway to memory institutions, and we think as soon as the RISM work records are uploaded, we will have a much easier time with this sort of project, linking from musicological work in the cloud to curated data. Thank you very much.